Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. I love talking to my friend Barbara Brancaccio, even though she's 40 years younger than I. Sociologists and demographers say she's part of Generation X and a daughter of baby boomers, while I am part of the silent generation. It's pretty funny. This generation stuff really, it confuses me, and I don't know if I really believe in it or not. What do you think?
I don't think that, I think that some people are sort of ageless, and that's something that you attach yourself to. I mean, I see it in my work all the time, that people really sort of find themselves in this niche of where they think they should be, or they're kind of moving forward and they get settled into things. Well, some people are always creative, always dynamic, and they just attach themselves to other people.
But is that more unusual? I mean, you're a 30-something, right? 30-something. I mean, there was a television show, 30-something.
Right.
Now we're talking about 20-somethings.
Right.
The generalization is that your generation is sort of in rebellion or revolt against the baby boomers. You think that's true?
Well,
that there was kind of a turnoff about their rush for money and self-enjoyment.
I mean, who are the baby boomers exactly, and when did they kind of come into that? Was that that was in the 80s, right?
No,
sort of
baby boomers are younger than that because they're just beginning to retire now. They're reaching 55 or something. So they're like late 50s through the 60s and 70s, I think. I'm not sure about the 60s and 70s. And they were, I mean, my generation is called the silent generation, or sometimes I think they call it the war generation. I mean, we came during the war, during the Depression, and supposedly we were very conscious of depression and never wanted that to happen again. Baby boomers then came along, and they had the Korean War, but it was never, it had, no victors, no nothing. And they came along and they were looking to be very successful and to have a lot of money and to be active and big stuff. And they have kids who now are supposedly, and they were very self-oriented, very. Now we have a generation that's supposed to be more self-assured and self-reliant, which you certainly are. I mean, that struck me. We should tell everybody that I met you when I first interviewed you for a job.
That's right.
And you came and worked in my office, and were terrific. And I was struck with the self-assuredness you had. And how old could you have been?
I think I was 24.
Yeah. And you had what, a master's degree?
I had just completed a master's degree.
Right. And you never were in doubt about it. You're never in doubt about anything, right?
That's not, well, that's not totally true, but maybe there is the self-reliance, the notion that...
And self-assured. I mean, when I was your age, I got married. I was one of the last of my friends to get married. And what did I think about? I thought, I'm going to marry somebody, and then I'm going to have children, and then maybe I'll work for a while, and then I'll have children. And that was my life. Now, when you finished college, you went to graduate school.
Right.
You didn't think the answer to your future was going to be getting married.
No, I didn't. Although I came from a family environment and an area of New York City where that was certainly the next natural step. So there was a little bit of that pressure.
You came from Staten Island.
Sure, Staten Island. And yeah, I grew up, and I'm a part of an Italian-American family, and so there's some sense that, that I should sort of move forward and get married and have children and continue to have a family life. And that was one road to go down, and that's a fine road. But I think in my early 20s, I moved out of my house relatively early. I went to college at NYU. I was really excited by the city. I became confident in just being in Manhattan and learning about different things. I really expanded my interests. And so by the time I was finished with college, I just wanted to go on to graduate school. I probably wanted to stay in school indefinitely. Right. And that was a great experience. And then when I came out of graduate school, I was interested in moving. I went to Rutgers. I was interested in coming back to Manhattan right away. And then I landed in your office. And so it seemed to me that was a momentum was happening. And in meeting you also, at the time that I met you, you were a city council member, and you had really a great career, and had been really involved in community work and in women's issues, and all of those things were interesting to me. So there were lots of possibilities suddenly in the other women that I was meeting.
But you know, of course, that inside of me, I've never had a career, and I still haven't decided what I'm going to do with my life. So I think that is a generational difference. Because, I mean, it seems to me, people your age started out thinking, you're going to take care of yourself. Yes, of course I want to get married and have children, but I'm going to take care of myself. We never did that, you know. Gloria Steinem once said that women are the biggest gamblers in the world because they gamble on the future of their husband, which is basically true. I used to think, what am I going to marry? Of course, you know, I come from a Jewish American family, and it was a doctor.
Right.
But I didn't find doctors too attractive, so then it been a foreign correspondent, and it was this or that. But so that's a major difference, I think.
Right.
The other thing that's a major difference is that, first of all, I didn't go away to college. Now, a lot of people my age did go away to college, but I didn't. But I never had my own apartment. I lived with my family, and then I got married and lived with my husband. And you have an apartment. Then when I started to furnish the apartment, it became a very serious thing. Well, how many apartments have you had since I've known you? I'm amazed.
I counted the other day, actually. That was a task for me, for my job. I think it's been 4.
4 apartments. And then you just pick up and you do it. You move, you know?
Right.
That's a major thing in my life.
Right. It's getting harder.
Oh, all right.
Now,
I'm glad to hear that.
because you have more things and so forth.
So, but you are interested in finding a mate and having a family.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's always the intention. I mean, when I came out of school and I was pursuing my interests, I wasn't really thinking about getting married as this this thing to do that I had to do, and I wasn't looking for a set of a criteria, you know, to check off, which maybe I should have been, but I think I was really focused on developing myself as a person and finding a partner and meeting other people, and I just wasn't there. I just wasn't thinking that, you know, you have to put a lot of energy into finding a partner, and at that time I was really putting a lot of energy into pursuing my interests, and I had a lot of them.
So what were your interests? You had a master's degree in women's studies.
I mean, at that time I wanted to do community work. I thought that I wanted to be a part of a nonprofit organization. I had started in your office, and that was the district office for your councilmanic district, and that was extremely interesting. But then I also wanted to sort of specifically work with women, and from there it was through a project that you had started with some of your peers over the years, Women Care, that I then went on to work as the deputy director of that organization, then the executive director of that organization. So, and that was working with incarcerated women.
So that was it was more or less a mentoring program, or a program as women came out of prison. It's a fascinating program. Did you work up in the prison? Because by this time I wasn't that affiliated with it.
Right, I did actually. What happened was when I was in your office, they had another executive director has gotten a grant. It was a grant through the city to go to Rikers Island. They had already been delivering the program at 3 of the facilities upstate: Bedford Hills Correctional Facility, Taconic Correctional Facility, and Bayview, which was here in Manhattan, right on 20th and 11th. And then when they got the grant from the Department of Correction, it was to go to Rikers Island to bring similar services there, where we would go and do a life skills program, then meet women and try to match them with mentors when they came out into the community. They had that money for a little while. They were searching for someone. And I had interest and had gotten to know the women who were running the program. So I went over and then took that program over. And as we, you know, just to kind of prevent redundant services in New York City, we ended up merging that program with Women's Prison Association.
Did you find when you went into the jail, and Rikers is the jail as opposed to the prison, which is a year-long term, did you find an affinity with these women?
Yeah, I did, actually. I remember once, a long time ago, you had said to me something fascinating, that you first became interested when you were working in Mario Cuomo's cabinet for the Division for Women, and that people were contacting you after you did that hearing on domestic violence at Bedford. And what they really needed was to have some connection to a woman in the outside world. And so naturally you got all your friends together and created a mentoring program, which is perfect because all of those same people are truly mentors. to other women who were in the field for sure. And you had said that one of the things that was so interesting about it is that it's such a seductive issue.
It is, yeah.
And I think that you meant that in the purest sense of the word. And as time went on and I really got involved in going into the facilities and hearing people's stories and trying to develop a program and trying to make some changes, I really understood what that meant, because you know, you come to realize that so few people want to work in that field to begin with, and it's really, incarcerated women are the margin of the margin. It's every problem that you've ever
come together,
learned about, whether it's domestic violence or poverty issues, and it's relationship issues. It all sort of comes together in one place, and on some way you have to step back and say, under those circumstances, I can't imagine not going to.
Yeah, I used to always feel there,
prison.
but for the grace of God goes
right.
I.
Right.
It was such a thing and such a compelling thing. But let's go back. I mean, and then, well, then you went on to what? Then you went to prison, Women's Prison Association. You also have been interested in film, so you're directing and producing a film, right?
That's correct.
And you're now back in the Social Service Agency.
That's correct.
And you're a deputy commissioner at HRA, the Human Resources Agency.
That's correct.
And all of this by the time you're what age?
35.
35. You've also formed a not-for-profit for the women at Bayview. Was that right?
That's right.
Teaching them how to...
Having worked in women care and then with Women's Prison Association, I also then went on to work with lots of the different organizations that I had worked with as the executive director of women care, just in offering consulting, fundraising, development, that sort of thing. And I became, you know, you end up having your own opinions about how things should be. And with a group of 4 other women, we started a program called the Learning Center for Women in Prison, specifically at Bayview Correctional Facility, which is a model educational program. It's a college program that's really modeled after the college-bound program at Bedford Hills.
Sorry, I moved the chair back. When I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about when I was 35. I had 3 young children. I was home. I used to go to the playground. I loved it. It was one of the greatest times. I got involved in politics, but I loved to be home and entertain and cook and everything. And this is just what's so striking to me. Now, the other difference between us, and to come back and forth, is that you were born in an era where there were a lot of things available to you. I mean, first of all, we had gone through a revolution with contraception and
the year I was born.
Yeah. And so there were just different social habits and social things. You've lived with somebody and not married them. I never, it never would have happened at my age. So it's a very big difference, isn't it? That we come out of a kind of the women's movement had hit its full stride. The social awareness of things, the world had changed, the beginning of globalization and more exchanges, and just a whole different world, and I think it does reflect in what we do. I mean, I always loved it when you didn't have a job, or even when you had a job and you need more money, you were a bartender.
Right.
That just is so different to me and very exciting and interesting. But what I find missing from your generation or from younger people today is the passion that we seem to have had in the early 60s, and I don't know, of public policy and stuff. Now, you get excited and you work in political campaigns, but have you ever really had a political hero?
No. I mean, it is. We've actually had this conversation a number of times. I mean, just going back to the first part of what you said, I sometimes think, by the time I hit your office, and I had all of that energy and enthusiasm after getting a master's degree in women's studies, I wonder, to some extent, did you think to yourself, I don't know why she's, a feminist, she's living what we were working for, to some extent.
No, I never thought of that. I was just glad that you were.
Right.
That was terrific. I think that's terrific.
I don't think that there are a lot of people that are
that conscious of it.
That's right.
Yeah. I thought actually you were quite remarkable in the fact that you understood that whole feminist drive.
Right.
Because a lot of people your age just take it for granted, right? They
Right.
didn't know it was any different.
Well, I mean, there was a time in the late 80s, I think, where people were criticizing the feminist movement so much and deconstructing it so much that it was hard to put the pieces back together to create a real movement, especially in New York City.
Right. I mean, it's always been more of a national movement or dependent, I think, on the leaders, right?
Yes, and it's always surrounded a few major issues, and that always happens around political campaigns.
Right. But we don't seem to have that now.
No, I mean, I think that that's a shame. There are a lot of people who, I noticed it during the summer, during this kind of campaign season, that there are lots of pockets of women's movements in New York City, but they just don't have that they're not really cohesive.
Together.
And I don't think that they could decide on what an agenda is. And the other part of it is that in sort of deconstructing feminism or the women's movement and really highlighting the diversity amongst women, whether it's racial diversity or class diversity or global diversity, people I think are now separated from each other, and they don't feel, people are not feeling like they could speak on someone else's behalf or, get involved in other people's issues, other women's issues.
That's supposedly a distinction of your generation, I have to tell you.
What do you mean?
That there's less collectiveness.
I agree.
Yeah.
And that, especially around that issue.
But there's no passion about the war in Iraq, is there?
Oh, I don't know about that. I think there's a lot of cynicism.
Yeah, well, I think that's another trait, right? Were you alive at Watergate? No.
No.
So you missed the assassination of President of the Kennedys. You missed Martin Luther King's assassination. You missed Watergate. Did you hear about those things when you were little?
Yes.
And what were they were taught as history in school?
Well, yeah, to some extent. My grandfather was a union man and a real Democrat, so he was always reading something or talking about it, and so I definitely heard about it.
Were you alive when the Soviet Union was still in existence?
I was. Yes.
Yes,
yes,
you were.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. Were you working in the office when I went to Russia? The Soviet Union?
No.
Right.
No, but we talked about it, actually. I remember talking about it.
Right. So what do you do in politics? Do you believe that you really can make a difference?
Well, I believe I can really make a difference.
Well, you've got all that self-assurance.
No, I don't know about that. I feel like I personally feel like community service is critical. It really is important for people to participate in wherever they live at whatever level.
Is that you come from a Catholic family? Is that related also to religion? Although I believe in community service too, so I don't know. But that is an overlap, isn't it?
Maybe it's a work ethic, or maybe it's attached to certain my grandparents' kind of generation. Maybe that is that post-war depression mentality that you have to sort of, maybe it's a Judeo-Christian thing. I'm not really sure. I know that I had my first job when I was 11 years old, and I delivered the Daily News, and my grandfather insisted that I do it every morning at 7 o'clock.
I never read the Daily News because I thought it was anti-Semitic.
Right. I mean,
it's an interest. Yes, so it is a work ethic that you grew up with. But so let's talk about politics. I mean, do you get involved in national politics with a great spirit and interest? Do you look to political parties?
I don't look to political parties, but I think I get involved in national politics. I don't know about great spirit and interest, but I definitely get involved. Yeah. I don't, I hate to say, I really personally don't go to a lot of rallies. It's just not my thing, and I think that is something that we've talked about in terms of a lot of people, a lot of my peers and friends and so forth go to rallies, and that's the way that they kind of demonstrate their interest and their issues, and it's important, and I have nothing against it. I just don't do it because I'm claustrophobic, and in New York City it's a lot of high drama, and I'm just not, I just prefer to contribute every day. rather than speak my voice.
I love to go to Raleigh.
I know you do. I know.
I love the excitement.
And you
of the
have
crowd.
exciting pre-rally meetings at your house.
Well,
where
no more, but I used to love them. You also grew up in an age where abortion was not illegal.
That's right.
So there has to be a difference in that. And how do you feel now about the movement to sort of curtail women's rights? You feel as strongly as
Of course. I think it's I mean, it's absurd.
Yeah. Can you imagine life without this ability?
I can't. I mean, I don't even, it's not even about abortion or no abortion. I mean, that sort of reproductive control is ridiculous. It's you know, that saying is love the fetus, hate the child. I mean, the way to raising a child is so much work and responsibility, and it requires so much support, and it's such a serious decision. I just can't imagine that being determined by the government or policymakers.
It's some white-haired old man.
That's absolutely true.
I mean, even know.
I have. I mean, I've been involved in conversations, and this speaks to my generation, where I've had conversations with friends where, like, someone has kind of, usually a guy or, you know, it's a kind of a young man, has sort of wanted to enter into the conversation. I've literally had friends look and say, oh no, you're not trying to have this conversation. I mean, people go from, you know, there's a continuum of tolerance of people in that public discourse. Right. You know, I mean, to some extent, know a lot of people who don't think that men have a whole lot to say about it, you know. But I think in general, I'm certainly raised in a generation where we accept that as an important value.
Will you take to the streets for that?
Yes, I would take to the streets for that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Is your mother as strong a feminist as you?
No.
And you're very close to a brother.
My brother, yes, very close to Joseph.
And is he a strong feminist?
No, but he is he's very open-minded. I don't know if he's a strong feminist. Actually, I know that he and I share very similar values when it comes to politics and rights and the war and so forth. I mean, he and I are on the same page in that regard.
So when you're working, do you see a difference in attitude between the people who are older than you and the people who are younger than you?
Not so much, actually. I mean, I don't see that because I feel like the people that are older than me that are in my life are very much like you are. And I'm not sure that has I think it has to do a lot with attitude rather than age. And there are some people who, while you may be conscious of you know, where you are and what your age is and what's different between you and some of the younger people that you know, the kinds of things, you're not like a lot of people your age in your actions, in your participation, in your politics, in your, you know,
That's because I have friends that are 40 years younger.
Yes, that's right.
It's very important.
You know, in that your opinion in this community is so very relevant, and that you keep that going by your continued participation.
Right, and by my friendships.
Right. I do believe that. I think, but I think that your friendships are also very interesting in the sense that, you know, I have said this to you before, and I really do mean this, having worked in your office, I think that what you did is that you brought together a group of people who you liked and enjoyed and admired, and created a work environment where you mentored people. And then, in some ways, put them out into the world strategically, like an army.
Enough about me. What else? Right. What was that joke about Mrs. Lincoln? But anyway, enough about me. But you didn't answer my first question. Mm-hmm. Is there a difference when you work with people, not me, of different ages? Do you see it with younger people that work for you? Are they different from you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And people who are older?
Yeah.
How are the people younger than you?
There are some people that are really fantastic, and
we don't believe in. Do we believe in this generational thing?
Maybe, maybe to some extent.
I just can't imagine what it would be like to read about the assassination. Well, first of all, President Roosevelt was the hero of my life, you know, as I grew up. And
right.
You didn't have a solid figure like that to really show you what government's all about. No. Then you didn't have the experience of being inspired or excited by certain wonderful speakers and leaders like the Kennedys or Martin Luther King and the effect of their assassination. So and you didn't have the threat of the draft and, you know, your brother being drafted to go to Vietnam in a war that we didn't like. So it is an interesting kind of question that I feel sorry for you because you're lacking all these experiences. How do you make up for them?
How do you? That's interesting. I don't know. I mean, I don't necessarily agree. I think that without making this entirely about politics, I think that my generation is extremely overwhelmed by the current situation
well, I'm glad
in
about
Iraq.
that.
And I think that there's I think September 11th changed all of that. And that was the Kennedy assassination for people of my generation, because you forget that, you know, people in their 20s and 30s who were just sort of getting going were really questioning what was going to come after that, and still do.
So we have 30 seconds. What do you think about the future?
Well, I think that in New York City, the future looks bright. Yeah. I really do.
And what about the world? You're an optimist about it.
Of course I'm an optimist. I think that changes have to happen, and I think that they can happen. But I think that we're in a great place, in a great city, and I feel very fortunate to be here and have a lot of great opportunities.
Well, I'm very glad that you're here, and I think that we're lucky to have people like you and you, so maybe the future is brighter than a lot of us think. So thank you very much, Barbara Brancaccio.
Thank you.
If there are any people you'd like to hear and topics you'd like us to explore, please let me know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.